this video, we're going to look at sentence order right? And so what I mean by that is, first let's take active voice, right? So you have active. Active is, first of all, let's talk about the parts. You have subject, verb, object, right? That is the basic order of active voice, right? So the subject is whoever's doing the action. They're the subject of the sentence. The verb is the action that they do, and the object is what they do the action to, right? So to give a very simple example, John hit the ball, right? So the subject is John, the verb and action is hit, the object is ball. That's active voice. In active voice, it's very clear who's doing the action. It's right up front. John hit the ball. The reason that it's important to understand and to study sentence structure in terms of your different parts is because an element of style is to be able to vary your parts and not have the exact same sentence every time over and over and over with your basic structure, right? So this is active voice. And these are things that you want to know, you want to grow into. You're not probably going to analyze every sentence to figure out what the voice is. But as you're growing and you're writing and you're getting there's going to be some other things that are more important up front. Learning your formatting, learning about in-text citations, figuring out some punctuation. And as you're going, little by little, I want you to be thinking about, though, as you're writing your sentences, are all my sentences the same basic structure? So that's why I want to break them down just a little bit into the component parts, subject, verb, and object, so that you can begin to think about what makes up a sentence, and that will give you a better idea of, am I doing the same basic thing? Because these words will be different. Different subject, different verb, different object, but is the order the exact same in all of your sentences? Another way to write is the passive voice. Now, in passive voice, the subject, which here is John, is either not in the sentence or it's at the end. So if it's not in the sentence, you would say, the ball was hit, right? So object is the ball, was hit, that's your sentence. It's not a great sentence, but you don't know who did it, right? You don't know who hit it, right? So the subject is left out. Or in passive voice, you can put the subject at the end. So it's the same information in this way that I'm going to show you, but the order is reversed. You don't want to do this all the time, but sometimes you can mix some things up for variety. So the passive voice of this would be the ball was hit by John, right? You don't want all of your sentences to be this way. You can mix it up for variety. So what would be an issue with this is that you don't find out who did it until the end of the sentence. And so for some sentences, that becomes confusing. If you don't know who's doing the action until the end, then sometimes with some sentences, then you got to go back to the beginning and read it again to understand. Because say if there's you're reading a story and there's several people and any one of them could have been the one that hit the ball. If you write it this way, then maybe, particularly if this was a little bit longer of a sentence, by the time they get to the end and find out who did it, then they may get to think about the sentence again. So, okay, so John was the one that did it. Now, what was it that he did? Particularly if you're trying to tell a story, you want your people to be able to envision it in their mind. So if you did the passive voice in this style, maybe it's harder for them to envision the ball being hit because they don't know who's doing it until the end. So the point is not to say that you need to have lots of passive voice in your paper. You know, that's not what I'm saying. What I want you to see is that there are ways of varying the order to bring a little bit of creativity to your writing style. But when you do it, make sure it's going to be effective, right? Because just because you put it into passive voice, maybe it's less effective if they don't find out who did it until the end, right? So you want to have a little bit of variety. Understand the parts of your sentence, right? And it will help you to think about the variety, because if you never think about the parts of the sentence, then you don't know if you're doing the same sentence over and over, if you have any variety or not. So you want to learn to begin to think about your sentences not just as statements that you speak, because when we speak, nobody's thinking about subject, object, verb. We're just talking. And so if you just write in the way that you talk, then you're never really thinking about the different parts of your sentence, and you never really grow in your command of a sentence, right? So when you're writing, don't be only just writing what you speak without any critical thought. When you're writing, learn to think in terms of component parts of the sentence, right? And it will help you down the road to begin to gain mastery of sentence structure if you see your sentences in component parts while you're going, right? Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is good active verbs, right? So we can ramble sometimes when we're choosing our component parts, right? So let's deal with the verb first. So a good active verb. This one, she was very amazing at preaching. That's the sentence. She was very amazing at preaching. That's something that a lot of people, particularly in the beginning of their writing, might write a sentence like that, right? A better way to be more concise. That's what we're kind of after here, is to learn ways to be more concise. So one way to be more concise would be to write that as she was amazing at preaching. So what did I do? I took out the word very. It's kind of, doesn't really add anything, you know. She was very super terrific. You know, you're adding in a whole bunch of words that stretch it out but don't really add much to the meaning. And so you could say she was amazing at preaching. That's more clear. That's better than saying she was very amazing at preaching. You know, that word very is something we use all the time in our spoken language, but it loses effectiveness in writing. It's actually better to take that out. Or another way you could say was, she amazed with her preaching. That's got more punch, more clarity. So a lot of times your first sentence is going to be something like this because that's how we talk. And so when you're going back in and doing your revising and your rewriting, you're looking for places where you put in things like very, or, you know, he really was sure a great guy. You know, you throw in all these extra little words that we say when we're talking that you can cut out, right? So you could cut out the very in that and just say she was amazing. Or you can take that word amazing and rework that even and say she amazed with her preaching, right? That has punch, that has clarity. So that's a way of going back in and looking at your verbs, right? So the verb was amazing, right? And so you want to adjust some of these things, right? Okay. Let me give you another one. The boss has made a request that we all arrive on time. Has made a request. The boss has made a request, right? That sentence makes sense, right? But it doesn't have punch. It doesn't have clarity. So a better way to write that would be, instead of the boss has made a request, you could write the boss requested. Has made, it makes sense when you're saying it, but when you read it, the boss has made a request. It's a lot of extra words. It reads better. It's more clear and more concise if you say the boss requested, as opposed to has made a request. It's a lot of extra words. So when you go back in, you want to look, are there places where you have stretched out a sentence with a lot of little words that we throw in when we talk, right? Okay. Let me give you a couple other examples of wordy phrases, right? Things that have too many words in it. It makes sense, but there's a better way to say it, right? We often say in the event of. You could replace that whole thing with if. If this happens. In the event of. Just say if, and then go. That's an example. On a daily basis, right? Every once in a while you could throw some of these things in here, but a lot of these are just overused, kind of cliche things that you can simplify and add clarity. So instead of on a daily basis, you can just say daily you need to. Clarity. Another one that you have to watch out for, a lot of people do this one, is they'll start a sentence with there or there was. There was a beautiful meadow. There was. I mean, what does that even mean? That's entirely unnecessary. You could just say the beautiful meadow. There was a beautiful meadow. Unless you're intentionally trying to do something in past tense, right, to say that there was and then it was destroyed. Most people aren't doing that. Most people, that's just how they open their sentence. They want to talk about the beautiful meadow. There was a beautiful meadow, and we did, better way to say is the beautiful meadow. There's a lot of these extra little clause things that make a lot of sense when we speak, but there's ways to clarify those, bring them down. This is really what revision is, right? It's not just, particularly the longer you do this, you will learn that your revision is not just looking for mistakes. When you first start, you're doing your rough draft. Your second draft, what you're doing when you're going through, for the most part, most students are looking for obvious mistakes, right? They don't want to be embarrassed when somebody's reading their paper. So their first thought is, I need to figure out what obvious mistakes. Did I misspell a word? Did I, forget punctuation? Did I do some kind of put the wrong word in? And so, like how autocorrect does. Sometimes you send somebody a text and it'll change the word on you. Well, we do that sometimes with type. We accidentally put the wrong word in, something like that. Obvious mistakes. Typically, when you first get started, that's the extent of your revision, is looking for obvious mistakes. But what I want to get you into is not just looking for obvious mistakes or looking for punctuation errors, but I want you to be able to take your sentences and rewrite them from their initial just way that you spit them out on a rough draft. Think about taking your sentences to a higher level, right? So not just removing errors, but rewriting them in such a way that they read better, right? Okay. Let me see here. When you get wordy, you're either too vague or too detailed, right? If you're too wordy, that means you're either too vague. She was very amazing at presentation. Kind of too vague. She amazed, right? You want it to be more clear. So if you're wordy, you're either too vague or you're too detailed. She was very amazing, spectacular, wonderful at preaching. It's too detailed, right? It's too wordy. So either you're too vague or you're too wordy, or too detailed, rather. Either too vague or too detailed will result in wordiness. So this is really an art to write. Mm-hmm. So there are rules that kind of govern the writing process. In the beginning, you're also trying to figure out rules, punctuation, grammar, some of that kind of stuff. But don't lose sight of the fact that word selection, thought precision, this is still kind of that lesson with thought precision about how to get your sentences to be clear and concise and have punch and clarity. And so it's really all about going back in and using a little bit of art, right? So that writing is, on the one hand, very structure-based, a lot of rules. On the other hand, it's very art-based, that there's a lot of creative thought that goes in, so that you're going to do a review where you're looking through your paper. You're going to find all those obvious mistakes. You want to find that. You want to remove those. But that can't be the extent of your review, right? Your review, your editing needs to be not just looking for errors, but looking for ways to make your sentence better, right? Okay. Vague qualifiers. A vague qualifier is something like this word very. That's the technical term for that. Is called a vague qualifier. Other examples, totally, that was totally the wrong thing to do, or that was extremely, that was really a bad turn, That word really, we use it in spoken language to provide emphasis. Loses that when somebody's reading it. It's just extra words. It's a vague qualifier. So instead of saying it was really a sharp turn, you could just say it was a sharp turn. And in reading, that's actually better when you're reading it that way. Okay. Somewhat. I was somewhat taking a gas, no, I was taking a gas, right? So you want to have clarity in your words, that there are some really vague words, right? That we throw in that make sense in our spoken language, but they really are vague. And when we put them into our writing, it just stretches it out. The other thing, when we're talking about stretching stuff out, one dangerous thing that people get into is, I say dangerous, I guess tongue in cheek, it's just homework, but one error that you can get into is trying to stretch your paper out because of a particular length requirement. And so say the paper is 3 pages, you feel like you got 2 pages done, good, and instead of writing a third good page, some people will go back into the first 2 pages. I've been a student for 12 years in college, so I know what all that is like. Maybe you got a lot of stuff to do that week, something happened, so instead of writing a third good page, you will go back in and stretch out some sentences in the ones that you already have, in the 2 pages you have, and try and make that 2 pages into 3 pages, by making vague sentences. I believe that the Bible really is a wonderful, great, excellent tool that we should all use in our personal Bible studies to expand and explore the great, wonderful, amazing things that God has in store for all of our wonderful, blessed lives as we turn ourselves wholly and fully, completely to the Lord in our Bible studies of wonder and grace. And you're throwing in all these things because you're just trying to make it longer, and you totally have lost touch with the purpose of the assignment is not to just reach a page requirement. It is to put out something excellent, right? And something clear and something well written, right? So you sacrifice quality just to do that, but it's the same number of words. So what I'd like to get you to see is, instead of trying to stretch out sentences that you already have to make 2 pages become 3, it's the same number of words. Write a third good page and let it be done that way. Don't ever try and take something and just stretch it out to reach a size requirement. You're ruining your writing style, for one, because you're learning bad habits. So you're ruining your writing style. You're making poor quality homework right off the bat, and you're typing the same number of words as if you had just done it the other way and written a third good page, right? So there really is no benefit to just stretching out a sentence. All right, let me throw out a couple little things here, then we'll end this section. The vague qualifiers are going to be there in your first draft until you get better at catching them. So don't feel like you have to catch all of that in your initial draft. That's what the rewriting and revision is for. But in your rewriting, these are some things that you should look for. So really kind of what I'm going to be doing over these next few lessons is kind of broadening your understanding of what you can look for in your revisions. I'm not saying that you need to be able to write perfectly on your first draft. Very few people can do that. What I'm saying is you need to be aware of the types of things that you should be looking for in your revision. So that's really what I want to kind of fill you with, is thoughts about the types of things that you could be looking for in your revision, right? Because the typical thought is, I have to just fix my mistakes, right? But I want to broaden that to where you're not just fixing mistakes, but you're taking average writing and making it great, okay? So, vague qualifiers, that's something to look for. Wordiness in your sentences, that's something to look for. Vague openings that are unnecessary, that's something to look for. Let me see here. These really are, in many ways, the ums of writing. A lot of times you've seen somebody give a speech and they all the time, in between every other word. Well, writing has something similar, and these kind of vague qualifiers kind of fit into that category. Just kidding. It takes work, right, to be able to develop these writing skills, but the end result should be eventually a finely crafted assignment, so that you're taking pride not just in completing it, right, hitting the 3 pages, but taking that 3 pages and bringing it to a higher level, right? So that really there is no such thing as writing, really rewriting. The first draft is the template, the thing that you're going to work with, the canvas, right? The actual writing skill is involved in knowing how to rework these initial sentences, because we tend to write our first sentences how we talk. Good writing is learning the things to look for so that you can take those initial sentences and turn them into something finely crafted. And so that's what we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks, is thinking about what should be at the forefront of our mind when we're doing our reviews of what we've written initially.